Ladies and gentlemen, good day to all of you from wherever you join us in this interesting energy risk webinar. I'm Hassan Al-Alawi. I'll moderate today's webinar. I'm Executive Director and CRO at Consultation Platform, which is a group of experts with a practical experience across the globe. I have over 28 years of experience in project management, project finance, M&A, risk and business continuity, gained from various positions. Prior to my current position, I worked for the sovereign funds of Bahrain and Oman. The webinar addressing securing, expanding your commodities business and managing risk effectively, and arranged by Risk.net and Energy Risk in association with Inuit. We aim to learn how commodity and energy firms in these regions are transitioning towards a carbon-free industry and best practices for moving into new markets and increasing market share. It's a 60-minute discussion that we hope will be interactive and beneficial to all participants. To make the webinar interactive, we will have 3 poll questions throughout the session. I will alert the audience when we run the poll question, and also we'll run the results from each question. We encourage the audience to ask questions, and I will cover some of the questions during the webinar where possible, otherwise at the end of the webinar. We have with us 3 experienced speakers: Mariam Salman, a consultant from Qamar Energy, Lawrence Cowan, Director of Energy from Sunseap Group, and Winston Lowe, VP of APAC Operations from Inuit. In a few minutes, I kindly request each panelist to give a short introduction to themselves and their interest in the topic. Starting with Mariam, Lawrence, and then Winston. The floor is yours, Mariam.
Thank you very much, Hassan, and the Inuit team for putting together this important and timely webinar. I am Mariam Salman, lead consultant at Qamar Energy. We are a Dubai-based boutique consultancy providing strategy, advisory, and commercial consulting on the Middle East's energy sector. My background lies in the energy geopolitics and international relations sphere, and over the last couple of years, my focus has seen an increase in advising on alternate and disruptive new energies in line with the global advancement on the energy transition. I provide tailored advice and risk assessments for investments and business development into the upstream oil and gas, midstream, downstream segments, renewables, and power and utility sectors. But energy efficiency and decarbonization have become a major part of the mix, particularly for energy companies who want to understand what this transition means for their businesses, particularly within the current more volatile geopolitical scene. A hot focus, therefore, is CCUS and hydrogen, which are widely regarded as the, so to say, best fit solutions to keeping hydrocarbons relevant and strengthening renewables offering beyond the power and utility sectors. I would say that a key metric of the risk assessment of any such new technology is being able to understand how it can be applied across all sectors, its economics and commercial viability, and narrowing the gap between ambition and feasibility. I believe this webinar will answer a lot of these practical questions, and I look forward to what should be an excellent and educational discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mariam. Lawrence, please.
Hi, Lawrence. Yeah, I'm Lawrence Quant. I'm from EDPR Sunseap, a renewables energy space, the developer vertical utility company in this space. We look into land grabbing, actually. We are looking into any roof that is greenifying or grid greenifying opportunity, land, water surfaces, anything that is baking under the sun, we like it. We also help our customers to look into how to best use renewable energy, because this is a finite resource. As soon as the project is concluded and commissioned, there is no expansion. The footprint is there. system size is finite, and therefore we have to be very smart in using them. We also provide energy efficiency services and look into being a partner with all our customers. We have been in this space for 12 years, and over the years we have seen from the time where solar was relatively expensive to now, which is grid parity in most places. And obviously with all the awareness of what renewable energy does to the environment and how reducing one's carbon footprint becomes important, we continue to then strive to reach a higher yield for each of the footprint that we put on in anywhere we go. In the event of such situation that we are in now, with the global transportations restrictions, the lack of materials, I think this webinar will be very interesting to look into how it affects project management such as ours, and how to then continue improvements, because when there is restrictions, when there is economic challenges, some developers will then move into top line. What happened to the R&Ds? What happened to the effectiveness improvements? What happened to increasing the yield per footprint? These are some of the topics I would like to have a conversations, and I hope everyone walked away today with something new. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Winston?
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Hassan. This is Winston Low from Inuit, heading APAC office for the ETR and CTRM solutions. So my background is I've been in the implementation and sales for about 10 odd years. So coming with me today is a team of experienced consultants and industry speakers. Together, I hope today's session will bring about a good knowledge about securing and expanding commodities in terms of using systems, as well as providing turnkey solutions for front office, mid office, and back office, hopefully to bring the audience a new experience with how CTRM and ETRM works for everyone here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, panelists. And now let's kick off the webinar. As I mentioned earlier, we aim to learn how commodity and energy firms in APAC and Middle East are transitioning towards a carbon-free industry. Nonetheless, with the recent geopolitical conflict, someone may question the challenges towards moving to carbon-free, knowing that world seems to be more into carbon industry dependency, which we could debate that this very much is a transition until the world, specifically Europe, finds out long-term options to replace their dependency on carbon industry. So the question is for the audience now. Has the current ongoing Ukraine-Russia conflict and geopolitical uncertainty impacted your commodity and energy business? You have 4 different choices. Please go ahead. While waiting for the results, let us solicit the panelists' views on the same. So the question to the panelists, I will start with Mariam, and we'll come back in a minute or so for the poll results. How do we foresee the impact of current Ukraine-Russia conflict on the industry? Where are we globally, and how APAC and Middle East regions would react towards this? Mariam?
Thanks, Hassan. So right now I'm supposed to give a brief answer to fill in the gap till the audience shares their poll answers, or because I have a lot of views and I don't want to go over. Yeah, sure.
Yes,
okay.
That would be great. Yes.
Yeah, no problem. See, look, from an energy transition perspective, it has put a lot of climate agreement requirements and sort of environment ambitions into jeopardy, because we have seen sort of a regression back to hydrocarbon-fueled power generation, hydrocarbon-fueled transport strategies because of the skyrocketing prices of energy for oil and gas, which have made it difficult for the end customer at the pump to pay for them. So we are seeing that instead of utilizing natural gas, which the prices for have been so high, there is a switch back to coal for generation, which is, of course, more polluting and dirtying. And from the perspective of the energy transition, this puts a question mark on whether the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming limit of the Paris Agreement could be adequately realized, and whether the interim targets for 2025, 2030 could be met effectively.
Great, Mariam. With that, we've got the results of the first poll question, which is very much interesting. Yes is almost 77%. That the businesses basically the current geopolitical has definitely impacted their businesses. So with the results and with the other points, Mariam, that you would like to bring up, please go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Hassan. This is, of course, a very important issue for our time, and I would sort of divide it into two parts. One would be to talk about the impact from the sector perspective itself, and then from the transition perspective, because both of them go hand in hand. We were already seeing from the beginning of the year, it was a dangerously tight perspective with regards to the oil and gas market. OPEC and Russia had increased production steadily over the last few months, but it had not been enough to meet demand. I think the International Energy Agency and OPEC themselves included had reflected that the market was largely in deficit. Part of the problem with this was that OPEC has sort of backed itself into a corner. It cannot produce a lot more oil because it has limited spare capacity. A lot of countries have a number of issues with their production capabilities. It could be infrastructure, there are bottlenecks, there is political instability, and in the case of producers like Iran, for example, there is lack of resolution on the nuclear deal. I think Saudi Arabia and the UAE are the only two oil-producing countries that have enough capacity that they could release, but other countries might not. And even then, Saudi Arabia has 2 million barrels per day. Maybe the rest of the organization has 1 million barrels per day. So that's 3 million barrels per day in an 11 million barrels per day market. That's not a lot of margin for unexpected outcomes, particularly with regards to Russia. So we know that if Russian oil is entirely taken off, OPEC could not meet this, even though the agreement to end cuts is nearing its completion in September. Now, the major impact of this has, of course, been oil and energy flows towards Europe, but we have seen an increase in Russia's energy flows to the East Asia Pacific region. So we have seen China has become a new consumer, a larger consumer. India has started snapping up more cargoes. And this is because Russia is discounting its oil very heavily. Oil prices we saw reach record levels of over $130 per barrel, which forced the EU and the US now to continue searching for options to cut Russia's energy earnings without driving prices through the roof similarly. And I know they're now thinking of implementing a cap on the price of purchased Russian oil, but this is problematic because it will sort of force the EU to reconsider its ban on ending Russian crude by end 2022, seaborne shipments, etc. I know Poland and Germany have agreed to end pipeline imports, and if these are actually implemented, the only Russian oil flowing to the EU will come via the southern Druzhba pipeline. But the EU cannot actually take more action on Russian sales to external customers, to Asia, for example. If it implemented a shipping ban, it would anger important allies, such as India. It might invite sanctions avoidance, like we have seen with Iran. It would drive oil prices up even higher. So the impact of that would actually be triggering a global recession, escalating socio-political grievances in cash-strapped countries, and creating political pressure on the EU and the US and other Western countries to concede to Russia. From a transition perspective, as I was saying earlier, it has already resulted in a switch back to coal for power in Europe due to the skyrocketing prices of natural gas and Russia cutting back gas shipments. which puts the European Green Deal, the Paris Agreement, and several other important climate agreements into jeopardy as they rely on the realization of significant clean energy and renewable projects targets. One bright spot, so to say, might have been gas, because it has gained in importance even more, particularly for the Middle East, our region, because it sees that it has now a new role to be a prime supplier to assist Europe and rest of the world by expanding its gas sales. So we know Qatar recently finalized its international partners for the North Field expansion project, and ADNOC in the UAE is also expanding its own capacity. It's intending to double it. For me, the four main takeaways from the impact of the current crisis on the energy transition from a Middle East perspective would be, or sort of to say the opportunities would be for the Middle East to supply new and additional gas and LNG to the EU via North Africa or GCC in the short term to assist with the energy crisis, sort of to scale back the coal generation that is going on and sort of bring them back on track with their energy transition targets. Expand exports of hydrogen. So number one would be blue hydrogen to Asia Pacific region to assist with their decarbonization efforts. And in the medium term, also send blue hydrogen to Europe. Provide cheap electricity generated from renewables to Southeast Europe via the GCC countries. So this would also eliminate other hydrocarbon-based generation and become a potential exporter of clean or green hydrogen in the medium to long term, now that Russia has obviously been knocked out of the race, although it shares very important infrastructure with Europe.
Great, Mariam. And you've covered almost all the hot geopolitical points from both sectors and transactions. And with that, I'll leave Lawrence and Winston's views for other questions. So I'll move to the next one. And we covered already the poll question, the results. Now, which is very much in line with what you mentioned, Mariam. The expectations. Now, moving to the next item in our agenda, Lawrence, how do you see the trends and best practices in diversifying commodity portfolios?
Yes, thanks, Marianne, for preluding into a lot of factors such as the need for renewable energy generations assets to come in to try to replace hydrocarbon-based energy generations. That's one. And the other factor that she put in so rightfully is cheaper source. But these two usually don't come hand in hand, especially in the situation such as now, where there are restrictions due to lack of materials, number one. Number two, the restrictions of transportation, freight. Shipping lines has been now made more challenging. Shipping costs has gone up. So renewable project cost inevitably has gone up. And if you were to amortize the cost over a duration, it is only that much that the developer can play. And therefore, the power purchase agreement prices will also be relatively higher. This is one. Two, how do we then make use of current situations to then hedge against the future purchase of materials? This is something new and something very challenging, because no one actually expect a Russia-Ukraine conflict. And for the longest time, we have been relying on manufacturing coming out from China, for example. Now there is relatively a need, sudden realizations that we need to alternate some of this source of manufacturing of panels, of inverters and batteries and stuff like that, even the source of labels for such installation. So the trend now is to diversify sources, diversify man-hour, diversify the FX itself. When you have various sources coming in, and some of these are largely US dollars based transactions, maybe good in the past, maybe now looking into renminbi, into other currencies. So there is going to be a cocktail of diversity that developer like us will have to look into. Second, or third, is also looking into alternative to what has been done. We all talk about solar being the cheapest, the fastest, the easiest to go online. Is it the case? We will have to step back and ask ourselves, what else? 12 years ago, when we talk about solar, everybody is like, it's going to be expensive. But now it's the cheapest. What else is coming in? Hydrogen? Is it going to be worth the market today? What other than hydrogen? So this trend of asking ourselves what's next is coming up.
Yeah, great. And Winston, would you like to add anything to Lawrence's points?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I heard from, in fact, Hassan, yourself, Mariam, and Lawrence. Now, we are, the world, right? We are moving from a, crude-based sort of like a fuel into a sort of like clean-based fuel. So with all this, right, we know realistically, we still need crude, right? We still need, things like that, right? Going into the renewables is a great idea. But having said that, we still need to diversify, right? Like rightly Lawrence mentioned, diversification is key. And with that, I think how do we, as a business owners or even solution provider, can sort of like drive a certain point is we need to consolidate all these risks, be it diversification, information, and risk appetite, risk allocation, and risk limits, the risk culture of a client, in fact, with the resources that are put into all this business and processes. Now, if you look at all this, typically having a good systems or in fact a good infrastructure to maintain all this to help businesses to sort of like mitigate potential losses or risk appetite. Having said that, that will also help to lead a more effective operations. In fact, if the businesses now requires to expand or even to diversify, that will help in turn generally an idea on how do we do that.
Okay, great. Actually, Winston, you've already answered some of the next question, which is expanding your operation effectively, I guess, right?
Yeah.
You touched into that, and Lawrence, feel free to add any points on this item, please, on the how to expand your operations effectively.
Yeah, of course. Everybody is talking about digitization. The main thing is where are the areas of digitization? To understand the problem statement is important. And today, the problem statements keep stacking up because the world is not standing still. It is moving. We ask ourselves materials. We ask ourselves research and development. This two, again, doesn't go hand in hand.
Yeah,
materials that has to be proven cheap and economical so that energy produced from a project based on this is affordable for you and I. Research has to get funding, and this is usually cannibalizing from the organization themselves. So how do we do it effectively? So the word digitization sometimes is a sexy word, if I may use the word, but yield very little. And so we have to understand the problem statement and effectively use a tool such as IoTs or things IoT. But now there's another sexy word called Internet of Energy, right? Internet of Materials, Internet of Development. We got to be very, very smart in using this.
So I think, Lawrence, I think you got a point there. So to add on a few more points to what I think, what do we mean by expanding our operations more effectively is typically, I think, most of my clients will ask me, how do I expand, our current, variety of features or products. So typically a book, sort of like a book solution to all this, I would say, is understanding, what the current situation is. What do you have currently in the commodity space for the client? How do you want to expand those, and then how do you fit in multi commodities in a business, as well as understanding the market share, right? Really you need to know what areas are you expanding to. In fact, if you are doing something that's way out of what you are currently doing, is you're not leveraging on your expertise. Typically, if you are looking to expand, you want to expand gradually and safely. Of course, last but not least, in operations, typically we will have to evaluate the capability of each businesses, understanding the right resources, the right process, and the right systems. I mean, this is some of my typical discussion point with my client. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Winston. And this actually nicely take us back to the audience with our next poll question, which is now supposed to appear on the screen. Yes, is your company digitally prepared to diversify yourself? Is your company digitally ready to diversify its portfolios? Again, audience, you have 4 different choices. Please go ahead. And as with the previous poll question, while waiting for the results, moving to the next item of the agenda with Mariam this time. The item is about harnessing new technologies to build the risk function of the future. And again, Mariam, if you can touch up on a high points and then look into the poll results of question 2 and then back to you again.
Sure. Thanks, Hassan. So while we wait for the audience to give in their results for this, I just wanted to raise attention to a very interesting point that Lawrence mentioned earlier. It was about how we know that the next generation of technologies is more focused on digitization, but there seems to be a disconnect between what the sector understands to be advanced technologies to support its energy transition, with traditionally the focus being more on hardware, such as low carbon infrastructure, to replace legacy carbon intensive systems, vis-a-vis advanced technologies like IoT, ICT, big data, and artificial intelligence. I believe finding the balance between both, wherein you could, in the short term, implement a lot of digitalization technologies to increase your efficiency and mitigate emissions, would be the key to having established infrastructure, low carbon infrastructure that can drive your energy efficiency gains in the longer run. I would believe that for the energy sector, even small gains in flexibility or capacity in clean energy and other energy intensive sectors like power and industry can be escalated faster through these solutions, rather than relying alone on hardware technologies in the longer term.
Okay, great. Do we have the results or not yet?
Okay.
Check. Okay. Yeah, great. Okay, that's interesting. Very interesting results.
Yeah,
at least I wouldn't expect that. Yeah, we're working on it. Has the majority. That's a good sign, and of course, panelists will shed some light on that. And digitally prepared, yes, is equal to no. So it's very interesting result. Mariam, back to you again, and then we will get Lawrence and Winston views as well.
Thanks, Hassan. It's actually very interesting that the yes and no answers are equal for are we digitally ready to diversify our portfolios? But it's good to see that there is collective action towards working on it. What I would say is Okay, from a Middle East perspective, the region is characterized by a large number of state-owned energy companies, right? We don't have a lot of private sector companies. And the key risks that these companies might face are different than the energy companies elsewhere, in that for the major hydrocarbon producers, securing a future offtake market for their hydrocarbon products is more essential. The driver for this is obviously socioeconomic, because the economy of these countries relies heavily on hydrocarbon revenues, which forms a basis of the social contract that they share with their residents. Climate change and the transition are wild cards. It has put into limelight these energy companies and what they are doing with their portfolios. And in a sense, it has heightened the sense of urgency for them to not only secure their future markets, but to do so in a way that they do not lose out on public and international support, sources of financing, green financing going forward with their energy structures. I would say that still to date, and even though we know that the UAE is probably the leading country in the region that has taken the most strides in its clean energy portfolio with the slew of renewable projects and a lot of investments in hydrogen, etc., they are still concentrated on securing a role for their hydrocarbons to still keep them relevant, even if this comes at the expense of slower progress on other clean energy technologies. I don't think that these countries are particularly that focused on digitalization technologies as much as they are focused on hardware or infrastructural changes, or process changes. So for example, I mentioned carbon capture, utilization, and storage earlier, and hydrogen. These countries, they have the logistics for it, they have the economics for it, they have the geographic location for it. And if we talk about a low carbon future, obviously capturing CO2 is a major part of it, because all of the climate change agreements that we have globally today, they require you to make gains in your mitigation of emissions. Your efficiency gains should drive your decarbonization. So captured CO2 could be stored underground or be utilized for other activity. The GCC within the MENA region has tremendous potential for CCUS. They have a lot of storage space, which could make them a center for CCUS for its own needs, or importing or re-importing CO2 derived from its hydrocarbon exports, which could so as to say feed into a so-called circular carbon economy. Blue hydrogen would obviously be the other side of this coin, because the region is very competitive. It beats every other region on costs, and it is much superior to hydrogen in Europe or East Asia. But I would like to draw the focus back to the fact that building a successful risk management strategy for energy firms in the Middle East region to face the transition has its own strategic and operational challenges, which might be very different from companies in other countries. And I'm sure Lawrence and Winston will speak to this, of course. What our countries can do, they can make several immediate improvements, right, to their energy operations by utilizing big data analytics, artificial intelligence, ICT, IoT, Internet of Things, and things like that, to identify patterns and insights in operations output, production output, to learn from their previous experiences and improve system performances over time, so to say, and predict and model possible outcomes of complex situations. One key metric that goes into risk assessment now, what we do as a consultancy, we have to advise very deeply on the geopolitical situation and changes to legal and regulatory frameworks, which can come sort of as wildcard risks to companies who have not considered these to be a part of their risk assessment metric previously. We know that the current risks to energy are paramount, and the leading one is actually being able to meet demand in a way that does not send energy prices skyrocketing. This has been heightened by the geopolitical tensions we were talking about. There is conflict, there is unrest, and there is climate change. Operational risk can be a byproduct of such risks in energy importing countries, where their utilities could experience blackouts, outages due to disruptions in the global supply chain. Maybe they don't have enough feedstock to feed their power plants, or maybe the price of gas is so high that they would rather switch to something more polluting just to be able to meet demand in their countries. What I would think then is that finding a balance between hardware-focused changes, right? So between your hydrogen and your CCUS and your new renewables, or a firming of renewable energy, and next-generation digitalization, could provide an ideal buffer to future risks. If in the short term we are focused or we escalate or scale up the implementation of next generation digital technologies, which are there, they exist, they are proven, they can help your business mitigate a number of emissions. It can drive a lot of efficiency and sort of put you on track to meeting climate goals. If you can do that in the short term, you can use that period to implement a lot of hardware changes to your overall energy infrastructure, which is time consuming and costly. And in the current environment, we have to make sure that we're attracting the right finance to be able to support these projects. So in the short term, I suppose we would have to focus a lot more on scaling up advanced technologies and digitalization, while at the same time laying the groundwork to finally establish hardware-focused changes to our infrastructure.
Great, super. Thank you, Mariam. Lawrence and Winston, please.
I will just have to say very short. What is the risk that you may face have to be derived at your respective problem statement. Today, not many actually spend time to sit down to define the problem statement. Has always been driven to what is deemed to be. Not many sits back and have a real deep dive to define the problem statement. We have all the tools. We have all the talents. What is your problem statement?
I see. I think Mariam and Lawrence put out a very good I think in the debate on where are we heading or where are we now, right? I think from a systems point of view, right? These keywords, diversification, information, risk appetite, the risk culture again. All these are decision or criteria that typical businesses has to evaluate whether should they be, utilizing a better system or stick with the current system that they have. So typically, it is never a good time to diversify. Never a good time to start thinking about, investing into a system, a software. So I think if you look at the poll results, it is fairly accurate in the sense that a lot of companies are still working on it, finding the right solution, finding the right time to go ahead and pursuing these tools. So we all know the risks behind businesses, but are we prepared? Are we, infrastructurally prepared to sort of like maintain or even scale to a certain level? So I hope, with all these inputs from the various the panelists, it enables our audience to understand, from the risk point of view, from the business point of view, from the systems point of view, what is required from each of these to help them to so-called move forward. Yeah. Over to you, Hassan.
Great. Yeah, great. Thank you, Winston. And by the way, audience, please feel free to ask any question. And as I mentioned earlier, we will take those questions either during our discussion or later on. But we are not going to ignore any question. Please feel free to ask. And now back to you, audience. Having said that, our last poll question is on the screen now. Do you believe that having an ETRM system and a trading and risk function will help your business to be more competitive and risk adverse? Please select one choice out of the listed 4 choices.
So, Hassan, while waiting for the results of the questions, maybe I can just kickstart some
yes, please.
Comments.
Yes, please.
Comments
go ahead,
on
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So I think we have discussed for the past 2 questions already, mainly on the risk side, on the diversification side, expanding on operations. So from a system point of view, what actually it drives behind a business's decision. I think typically what the client should be looking out for in terms of CTRM technology to move to the next level is they need to find a solution that is functionally fit, right? Functionally fit means it aligns with the strategy of the business. It aligns with the process. It features exactly what you need to perform a task or an operation. So this is a very important key decision for really considering a systems. Typically, I think the second question is I think Mariam has put in a very good explanation on technology. Moving towards the next level, or even what we call a future proof. It's we need to follow, or we need to look into newer technologies like, I don't know, typically microservices or RESTful API, which sort of like very highly flexible or modular and versatile technology that enables solution provider to quickly design a solution out of an existing architecture. So I'm not a technically inclined person. I cannot speak for those experts in terms of the current newest technology like blockchain. Or I do feel that as the world progresses, newer technologies will emerge where solution providers like us will take on this opportunity to leverage on our knowledge and pursue newer products for the market. So I'm not sure if the answers to the poll has arrived. Hopefully they can give us another.
I guess yes, you did.
New perspective.
Now we should compare what you mentioned with the results which are now on the screen. Again, interesting result. Do you believe that having an ETRM and a trading risk will help your business? Yes, 42.9 is equal to don't know. We would like to explore this further. And this is actually, I see it quite encouraging, because that means, audience and probably firms would like to have more details into the ETRM. And probably that's why they choose to say don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I think I share your point. Yeah, I think if you look at these results of the question, almost 50% is yes, 50% is I don't know. I will categorize no and others under don't know, right? Because typically these are people, they are not convinced that having a system would actually provide a help to be more competitive or more risk averse. So I think really we understand that systems or tools, they play a major part in assisting businesses to sort of like diversify, sort of like expand or scale. So again, understanding the core vision of the company, what do you want to achieve in terms of gaining market share? What do you want to offer to the industry in terms of products? You may want to, a company may be very actively pursuing crude-based or refined products, but what does it take for the business to take the next step to a carbon-free commodities like gas or even this solar, or to name a few, or ammonia. So again, these commodities will let the businesses understand the need to have a system that is typically I would call it multi-commodity. So in that case, you are pretty much flexible in terms of scaling. Having said that, you can have all the best tools in the world, or the best analysts, or the best companies, or you're a big company, you're a small company. Typically, I think the most important thing is you have a core team with very effective effective planning. Meaning to say, you need the right people to use the tool, to design the tool, and to promote the tool. And one of the consideration in how do we ensure we can move businesses to the next level. And the success factor is we need to identify typically what's lacking or what's the gap in between each workflow from deal done to cash flow, right? APAR. So these are the things that the company itself has to spend on, in fact, invest in terms of identifying all these gaps. Last but not least, typically success factor, we need communication between all levels, be it the top management to the operation to the lower ground people. If you don't talk, you can have the best of everything, nothing works. So with that, I think I'll just let the rest of the panelists, if they have any comments or any addition to this question.
Yeah, so let me just quickly take Mark Albert's De Silva question, just using my pain point, right? Never mind about all the technical terms and fanciful words. My pain point.
Sorry, Lawrence. You are addressing. You are following up on Winston's or addressing a question from from the audience.
I'm following up on Vincent's point. I'm following up on Vincent's point, but we are also using Mark Albert De Silva's questions as an example.
No, I think what I would suggest, Lawrence, just comment on Winston, and then I'll mention Mark Albert question, or the question from the audience, and then that will be more easier for the rest of the audience to follow up.
All right. Again, understand your pain point. We went through that, through the pain point, define each of these very, very detailedly in order to understand our problem statement, and then look into the gap. And from the gap, apply what is available and easy implementation. Many times we come into implementing systems, the trap is implementing a very complex systems that changes the DNA of the company. So we have to avoid that. And therefore, understanding problem statements and pain point is important. Go ahead.
Okay, great, Lawrence. Yeah, and now the question from the audience is how would you describe your ideal risk management framework? Any emerging risk that we should watch out for? And again, Lawrence, back to you.
So a very quick one, the conflicts in Europe actually points out that people like us, the renewable energy guys, were not good enough to replace hydrocarbon-based generations. And you have read, countries are returning to coal just to get energy certainty. What do we need to do? This conflict has also caused realizations that what we deem or taken for granted, transportation, freight, market exchanges, long-term purchase agreement, put into test. Manufacturers are unable to get raw materials and therefore unable to deliver, even there is a long-term purchase agreement. Master service agreement becomes a piece of paper when there's no delivery. What do we do? And we have to then learn how to diversify. The word diversify is a short word, but to really understand how to diversify, who are the people that we can trust, and who are the people that can deem trustworthy enough to develop a solutions when there is a new problem, then you have to define what is called partnership. So one point, we are talking about commodities, type of commodities. The other point, we are talking about the human side of the house, where the companies that we deem as partners will have to also evolve together with you. And that's what we have gone through, or still going through, by the way. And how do we do this effectively and manage it effectively? Communications is the only means we see today. Openness, sincere openness and honesty. And this is how we are going to manage risk effectively. Systems tells us an indication. Systems will tell us a recommendation. Eventually, it still boils down to communications, sincere openness to mitigate a risk.
So, yeah.
Okay, great.
I think thanks,
Great, Lawrence.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just for the interest of time, sorry, Winston. I'll move to another question from the audience. Please share your thoughts on the fine lines between sustainability goals and strategizing risk mitigation. And if we, Mariam, would you like to take this one? And then Winston, if you'd like to add, then we can do that.
Sure, thanks, Hassan. Of course, it's a very good question, and what we need to understand is that risk mitigation strategy and ensuring the sustainability development goals oftentimes goes hand in hand. I suppose the question is referring to Sustainability Goal 7, which has to do with energy, because that is what we're talking about today. And one of the first indicator of SDG 7 is ensuring access to reliable energy. And it does not, clean energy is another indicator of the same SDG, but it comes way later. So if you are thinking of addressing a risk like demand management or supply management, your key metric there would be to first ensure that your populations or your citizens are receiving the energy, that their demand is being met, rather than trying to focus more on developing clean energy solutions or renewable energy solutions, no matter how loop-sided that sounds right now, because that's what we're trying to focus on. But in the current geopolitical climate, or let's say in the current volatile climate of the energy markets, it has become imperative for countries to ensure first that they are able to meet energy demand in a manner that is accessible. And accessibility does not just mean supply, it also means cost of affordability. Their populations are connected, and that they have the framework, or they are developing a framework that sees the transition of the current energy system towards a cleaner energy system. So if we're talking about countries in developing markets or in least developed countries, these countries might not have access to the financing or funding to develop clean energy solutions, right? So they would have to rely more on fuel oil or natural gas initially to be able to act on SDG 7 and meet that goal, which of course the UN meets once every while to reconvene and see progress on them. And it is essential to show that your country has met some part of that target, even if it was not entirely through a clean energy source.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Mariam. Going again back to another question, which is really probably like a comment, and I'll turn it to Winston. It says, this imperative to diversify one's commodity portfolio create a situation where there's just too many data points to keep track of for the typical firm, causing them to delay formalizing a strategy.
I think that's a very good question from the audience. So typically, you know, from a systems point of view, how do we, you know, mitigate such a, I think a challenge? You know, from a system point of view, we always thought like, you know, in a framework structure, how can we design a change and how can we deliver a change? So with this, typically, if a system is flexible enough for you to sort of like categorize or group information like commodity portfolio, where, you know, there are many data points, we can actually effectively filter them and pivot them into a very user-friendly and readable reporting. In such, you will be able to formalize a strategy fairly quickly. So having said that, the CTR system should provide the necessary tools for you to design a solution, process the information, and deliver the change, which is it can be an output such as a report or a result or a validation. so that it enables users to sort of like make a proper decision. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, Winston. And now again, for the interest of the time, we will have a last question from the audience. Does this imperative to diversify one's commodity portfolio create a situation where there's just too many data points? I think that
we answered that, Hassan. Yeah.
We answered that, right? Okay. Yeah, I think it was written twice. That's great. So we address the majority of the question. Thank you, audience. Now, thank you all. Before closing, I would like to ask each panelist for a final word. In 1 minute, Mariam, what is your giveaway?
Thanks, Hassan. My key takeaway would be that the current climate, although very challenging, provides a lot of opportunity to put together new solutions and put our heads together to come up with new strategies to get back on track with our energy transition goals in a manner that meets the world's energy demands, addresses the energy crisis, but also lets us keep our activities within the Paris Agreement's climate goals.
Great. And Lawrence?
Well, similar to Marianne, problem statements will always pop up. It's how we react to it and how we make use of the tools that is available, create new ones if necessary. But we see here, diversifying is the key now. Risk mitigation, you and I has been doing it for years. Diversifying is the key.
Great.
I think Mariam and Lawrence have almost mentioned everything that I can say. But last but not least, I think it's never a good time to look at tools or systems to go ahead and in fact diversify, in fact to mitigate risk or to understand risk. So it will be now. In fact, for those businesses, they are still not sure or not aware that how can a system help. So I hope from this webinar, this gives an edge to the audience on how can we move forward from here in terms of solutions, in terms of risk, in terms of systems. Yeah, thanks, Hassan.
Thank you, Winston. Thank you, Mariam and Lawrence, and thank you, audience. With this, we conclude the webinar. I hope you found it fruitful and beneficial by addressing its key points and covering the agenda items. Thank you all, and special thanks to the organizers and sponsors, and to our panelists, the experienced ones. Thank you very much for all of this.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Hassan.